The morning I received the call that changed everything. I was standing in my small apartment kitchen in Cincinnati, watching the rain streak down the window. It had been exactly 10 years since I'd last seen my daughter Sophie. 10 long years of wondering, hoping, and grieving for the little girl who'd been ripped from my life. The phone rang just as I was pouring my third cup of coffee, trying to shake off another sleepless night filled with dreams of what might have been. When I saw the area code from my old hometown of Charlotte, my heart skipped a beat. Nobody from that life ever called me anymore. I'd made sure of that when I moved away, trying to escape the memories that haunted every street corner, every familiar face. But something made me answer. Maybe intuition, maybe just the foolish hope that never quite died no matter how hard I tried to bury it. The voice on the other end was professional, clinical even, but the words hit me like a physical blow. "Your daughter Sophie has been in a car accident. She listed you as her emergency contact. We need you to come to Charlotte Memorial Hospital as soon as possible." I don't even remember what I said or how I ended the call. All I knew was that my 16-year-old daughter, the baby girl I hadn't been allowed to see or speak to in a decade, needed me. The 5-hour drive from Cincinnati to Charlotte passed in a blur of memories and questions. How had Sophie even remembered my phone number to list me as a contact? Why would she reach out to me after all this time when her mother Claire and stepfather Daniel had surely poisoned her against me? The last time I'd seen her, she was 6 years old, crying in a courtroom as a judge declared me an unfit parent based on lies so vicious they still made my stomach turn. I could still see Daniel's face that day, my former best friend since our college days at Duke, sitting on the witness stand with tears streaming down his cheeks as he described witnessing me violently shake my daughter during what he called one of my rage episodes. The words had been so unexpected, so shocking, that I'd actually gasped out loud in the courtroom. This was the man who'd been my roommate, my best man at my wedding, the person I'd trusted most in the world besides Claire. And there he sat, fabricating stories that would steal my daughter from me. Claire had played her part perfectly too, my high school sweetheart turned bitter enemy, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue as she corroborated Daniel's lies. She spoke of my alleged temper, of incidents that never happened, of a daughter who was supposedly terrified of her own father. The worst part was the doctored evidence they'd somehow produced. Text messages I'd never sent, video clips cleverly edited to make innocent moments look sinister. My lawyer had been caught completely off guard, and even he'd started looking at me sideways when I insisted it was all fabricated. That was the day my world ended. No visitation rights, no phone calls, no contact whatsoever. The judge's words rang in my ears for months afterward. "In the interest of the child's safety, I'm granting sole custody to the mother with no visitation privileges for the father." I'd stumbled out of that courthouse feeling like I was drowning, unable to comprehend how everything had gone so wrong so fast. The truth had come out that same night, in the cruelest way possible. I'd been drowning my sorrows in bourbon when my phone rang. Daniel's name on the caller ID. In my drunken state, I'd answered, ready to demand answers, ready to beg him to tell the truth. But the voice that greeted me wasn't apologetic or remorseful. It was triumphant. "Michael, buddy," he'd laughed. "That cold sound still echoes in my nightmares sometimes. You always were too trusting. I've wanted Claire since the day you introduced us. You know how obsessed I can get when I'm in love. Took a while to plan, but it worked out perfectly, didn't it?" Before I could even process his words, Claire had taken the phone. Her voice, once so sweet and loving, dripped with venom. "Daniel will be a better father to Sophie than you ever were. She's already calling him Daddy. You'll never see her again, Michael. Never." And then, as if twisting the knife wasn't enough, she delivered the final blow. "We've been together for 2 years, planning every detail. The affair, the custody battle, all of it. Sophie was never really yours anyway. She deserves better than you." I'd sobbed on the phone, actually sobbed, begging them to tell me it was some sick joke. But they'd hung up, leaving me alone with the devastating truth. My best friend and my wife had conspired to steal my daughter, and they'd succeeded. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that it broke something inside me that took years to even begin healing. I should have fought back, should have hired new lawyers, should have screamed the truth from the rooftops. But I was destroyed, financially and emotionally. The custody battle had drained my savings, and the court's decision seemed final. Who would believe me anyway? The evidence was there in black and white, even if it was all lies. So I did the only thing I could think of. I ran, packed up what was left of my life, and moved to Cincinnati, as far as I could get, while still being able to drive back if by some miracle things changed. But I never gave up on Sophie, not for a single day. Every birthday, I sent cards filled with all the love I couldn't express in person. Every Christmas, gifts chosen with care, wondering what size she wore now, what her interests might be. Letters poured out of me, one every month, telling her about my life, asking about hers, assuring her that Daddy loved her more than all the stars in the sky, just like I used to whisper to her at bedtime. I never received a response, but I never stopped sending them. They were my lifeline, my way of believing that someday, somehow, she'd know the truth. Now, as I pulled into the hospital parking lot with shaking hands, I couldn't help but wonder what I was walking into. Would Sophie even want to see me? Would Claire and Daniel be there, ready to have security throw me out? The nurse had said Sophie listed me as her emergency contact, but that seemed impossible. Why would she do that after 10 years of what I assumed was constant poisoning against me? The hospital smell hit me as soon as I walked through the automatic doors. That distinctive mixture of disinfectant and fear that seems universal to medical facilities. My legs felt weak as I approached the information desk, my voice cracking as I asked for Sophie Morrison's room. The volunteer's fingers flew over the keyboard, and she directed me to the 3rd floor, room 312. Each step toward the elevator felt monumental, like I was walking through quicksand. When the elevator doors opened on the 3rd floor, I saw them immediately. Claire and Daniel sat in the waiting area, looking like they'd seen a ghost. Claire's perfectly styled blonde hair was disheveled, her usually immaculate makeup smeared. Daniel had gained weight over the years, his once athletic frame now soft and bulging. But it was their expressions that caught me off guard. They looked afraid. The moment stretched between us, 10 years of hatred and hurt crackling in the air like electricity. Claire recovered first, jumping to her feet with familiar fury flashing in her green eyes. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, keeping her voice low but venomous. "You have no right at all." I forced myself to stay calm, to not let them see how much their presence still affected me. "The hospital called me. I'm Sophie's emergency contact." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "I have every right to be here." Daniel stood slowly, his bulk intimidating as he moved closer. "Emergency contact? That's impossible. We would know if she'd done something like that." His voice carried the same arrogant tone I remembered, but there was something else there too. Uncertainty, maybe. Or guilt. Claire grabbed Daniel's arm, her manicured nails digging into his sleeve. "This is a mistake. You need to leave. Now." "Security?" she called out, looking around for help that didn't immediately materialize. I stood my ground, drawing strength from the fact that Sophie had reached out to me even if I didn't understand why. "I'm not going anywhere. My daughter is hurt, and she wanted me here. That means something, whether you like it or not." The standoff might have continued indefinitely, but a young nurse appeared, looking between us with professional assessment. "Mr. Morrison?" she asked, and I nodded, my married name feeling strange after all these years. "Sophie is awake and asking for you. She's been quite insistent." The triumph I felt was probably petty, but I couldn't help the small smile that tugged at my lips as Claire's face went white. "That's impossible," she said to the nurse. "There must be some mistake. I'm her mother. I should be the one." The nurse's expression remained neutral, but her tone was firm. The patient specifically requested her father. Hospital policy is to honor the patient's wishes when possible. "Mr. Morrison, if you'll follow me." I walked past Claire and Daniel, feeling their stares burning into my back. Part of me wanted to turn around, to say something cutting, to revel in this tiny victory. But a bigger part was terrified of what I'd find behind that hospital room door. The nurse paused outside room 312, her expression softening slightly. "She's been through a lot. Concussion, broken ribs, some significant bruising. She's lucky it wasn't worse." "The accident." I had to ask. My throat felt tight. "What happened exactly?" She glanced back toward the waiting area, then lowered her voice. The car hit a tree. High speed. The driver, her stepfather, was intoxicated. He's been treated and released to police custody. The rage that flooded through me was so intense, I had to grab the door frame for support. Daniel had been driving drunk with my daughter in the car. After everything he'd done, he'd risked her life with his selfishness. The nurse touched my arm gently. She's going to be okay. She's a strong girl, but she's been asking for you since she woke up. That's unusual in cases where there's been no contact for extended periods. It suggests she's been thinking about you. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Taking a deep breath, I knocked softly on the door. A weak voice called out, "Come in!" And I stepped into the room that would change my life for the second time. Sophie lay propped up in the hospital bed, looking so much like the little girl I remembered, yet completely different. Her dark hair, the same shade as mine, was longer now, falling past her shoulders in waves that reminded me of Claire before bitterness had hardened her features. But it was Sophie's eyes that stopped me cold. They were mine, down to the little gold flecks that caught the light. Those eyes were filled with tears as they met mine across the small room. "Dad," she whispered, and that one word nearly brought me to my knees. I hadn't heard it in 10 years, had dreamed of it, had wondered if I'd ever hear it again. I moved to her bedside on unsteady legs, my vision blurring with tears I couldn't hold back. "Hi, baby girl," I managed to say, using the pet name I'd called her since she was born. "God, I've missed you so much." Sophie reached out with her good arm, the one not connected to various monitors, and I took her hand carefully, afraid she might dissolve if I held too tight. Her fingers were longer now, with chipped purple nail polish that made me smile through my tears. She was real. She was here, and somehow, miraculously, she'd wanted me here too. "I found your letters," she said, her voice stronger than I expected. 3 months ago, Mom and Daniel, they kept them all, every single one, in a box in the attic with my name on it, birthday cards, Christmas presents, everything. They told me you abandoned us, that you never wanted me, that you were dangerous, but you never stopped writing, did you? Never stopped trying. The truth of it hit me like a physical blow. They'd kept my letters, my desperate attempts to reach my daughter, like trophies of their deception. "Never," I said fiercely. "Not for one day, Sophie. I never stopped loving you, never stopped thinking about you. I sent something every month, hoping someday you'd know the truth." She squeezed my hand, tears rolling down her bruised cheeks. "I read them all in one night. Locked myself in the bathroom and read every word. You told me about your new apartment, about the job you got, about the plants you were trying not to kill." She laughed weakly. "Did the fern make it, by the way?" I laughed too, a watery sound full of joy and pain. "No, it died within a month. I'm terrible with plants. But I kept trying because I wanted to tell you about something growing, something alive, even when I couldn't watch you grow." We sat in silence for a moment, hands clasped, trying to bridge 10 years in a single touch. There was so much to say, so much lost time, but I didn't want to overwhelm her. She'd been through trauma, was lying in a hospital bed because Daniel's selfishness had finally manifested in a way that couldn't be hidden or lied away. Sophie must have sensed my thoughts because her expression darkened. He was drunk again. "Daniel, he's been drinking more lately, getting meaner. Mom pretends not to notice, but I see the bottles hidden around the house. I see the bruises, too. Something cold settled in my chest. Bruises. Sophie, has he been hurting you?" She looked away, suddenly seeming much younger than 16. "It's not. It's complicated. He doesn't hit, exactly. He grabs, shakes, pushes, only when Mom's not looking, and only when I talk back or don't do something fast enough. He's careful not to leave marks where people can see. I wanted to storm out of that room and beat Daniel to a pulp, to make him feel even a fraction of the fear and pain he'd inflicted on my daughter. But Sophie needed me calm, needed me present. So I swallowed the rage and focused on her. "How long has this been going on, sweetheart?" Sophie shrugged, then winced at the movement. "Years, maybe. It got worse after Tyler was born." "Tyler?" I asked, confused. "My half-brother. He's 3. Daniel's real son." She said it matter-of-factly, but I heard the hurt underneath. He treats Tyler like gold, never raises his voice, never grabs him. I think that's when I really started to question things. Why was I so different? Why did he hate me so much? That's when I started snooping, trying to understand. That's how I found the letters. The pieces were falling into place, painting a picture that made me sick. Daniel had gotten what he wanted: Claire, my life, my daughter, and then he'd treated Sophie like an inconvenience, an obstacle to his perfect family. The emotional abuse was clear, and now physical abuse too. While Claire turned a blind eye to protect her new family, her new life built on lies. "I memorized your phone number from the letters," Sophie continued. "Put you as my emergency contact last month at school when we updated our forms. I didn't know if the number still worked, if you'd still be there. But I hoped. Part of me thought maybe if something happened, maybe you'd come. I never imagined it would be like this, though." Her voice broke a little. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way." I leaned forward, careful of her injuries, and pressed a kiss to her forehead the way I used to when she was small. "You have nothing to be sorry for. Nothing. You're the bravest person I know, Sophie. You found the truth when everyone was lying to you. You reached out when you had every reason not to. I'm so proud of you, baby girl. So incredibly proud." She cried then, really cried, and I held her as best I could around the medical equipment. 10 years of pain and loneliness poured out of both of us in that hospital room. I whispered all the things I'd stored up, how I'd thought of her every day, how I'd driven past her school sometimes just hoping for a glimpse, how I'd kept every movie ticket and restaurant receipt from our last visits together in a box marked Sophie's Memories. The door opened abruptly, interrupting our reunion. Claire stood there, her face a mask of fury barely contained. "The nurse said you were awake. I need to speak with my daughter. Alone." The emphasis on my daughter was deliberate, possessive. Daniel hovered behind her, his face flushed with what I recognized as barely controlled rage. Sophie's grip on my hand tightened. "No," she said firmly. "I want Dad to stay." Claire's carefully composed expression cracked. "Don't be ridiculous, Sophie. You're confused from the accident. This man hasn't been part of your life for 10 years. He's a stranger." "He's not a stranger," Sophie shot back with surprising strength. "He's my father. And I know about the letters. I know you kept them from me. I know you lied." The color drained from Claire's face. "Where did you—" "The attic?" Sophie interrupted. 3 months ago. Every birthday card, every Christmas present, every letter telling me he loved me and missed me. You stole 10 years from us, both of you." Daniel pushed past Claire, his bulk filling the doorway. "You ungrateful little brat. After everything we've done for you." "Watch your tone," I warned, standing up slowly. Sophie pressed herself back into the pillows as Daniel's voice rose. "We gave you everything," he continued, ignoring me completely. "A nice house, good schools, a family. And this is how you repay us. Sneaking around, filling your head with garbage from a man who abandoned you." "He didn't abandon me," Sophie said, her voice shaking but determined. "You made him leave. You lied in court. I heard you talking about it once when you were drunk. You were laughing about how easy it was to fool everyone." Daniel's face went from red to purple. "That's enough," he growled, taking a step toward the bed. I moved between them instinctively, my protective instincts roaring to life. "That's close enough, Daniel. You've done enough damage for one day." He turned his bloodshot eyes on me, and I could smell the lingering alcohol on his breath despite the hours that must have passed since the accident. "You think you can just waltz back in here and play daddy? You're nothing, less than nothing." The court saw that 10 years ago. So did Claire. She chose a real man, not some pathetic loser who couldn't even fight for his own kid. The words stung, but not as much as they would have years ago. I'd had a decade to build my self-worth back up, to recognize their manipulation for what it was. "You're right about one thing," I said calmly. I didn't fight hard enough back then. I was devastated when my best friend and my wife conspired to steal my daughter. But I'm not that same broken man anymore, and you're going to find out just how hard I can fight now. A nurse appeared in the doorway, drawn by the raised voices. "Is everything all right in here? The patient needs rest." "No," Sophie said clearly. "These two need to leave. I don't want them here." Claire looked stricken. "Sophie, honey, I'm your mother. Of course you want me here. I want my dad," Sophie insisted. "Only my dad." The nurse looked between us all, assessing the situation with professional expertise. "The patient has the right to decide who visits. If she's asked you to leave, I'm going to have to insist you respect her wishes." "This is ridiculous," Claire sputtered. "She's a minor. I make the medical decisions." "Actually," the nurse said, checking her tablet, "at 16, she has certain rights regarding her medical care and visitors, and given the circumstances of her admission, we're required to respect her wishes." She paused meaningfully. "The police and Child Protective Services have also been notified, as is standard procedure in cases like this." That got their attention. Claire's eyes widened in panic, and Daniel took a step back. "CPS, why would you involve them?" "Standard procedure when a minor is injured in an alcohol-related accident," the nurse explained calmly. "Especially when there are other concerns noted by the medical team." "Other concerns," Daniel repeated, his bravado faltering. Sophie spoke up then, her voice small but clear. "I told them about the bruises, about how you grab me when you're angry, how you shake me when I don't do things fast enough. They took pictures of the old ones, the ones that weren't from the accident." "Little liar," Daniel snarled, but the nurse stepped fully into the room, her stance protective. "Sir, ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave now. Security is already on their way up." Claire grabbed Daniel's arm, her perfect facade finally cracking completely. "We should go," she whispered urgently. "We'll call our lawyer. This isn't over." Daniel pointed a thick finger at me as security arrived. "You poisoned her against us. This is your fault, all of it." They were escorted out, Claire's heels clicking frantically on the linoleum as she tried to keep up with Daniel's angry stride. The door closed behind them, and the room felt suddenly peaceful, like after a storm passes. The nurse checked Sophie's vitals, made some notes, and gave us both a kind smile. "I'll give you some privacy. Press the call button if you need anything." When we were alone again, Sophie let out a shaky breath. "They'll be back. They always come back, angrier than before." "Not this time," I promised her. "Did you mean what you said about the bruises, about CPS?" She nodded, pulling up her hospital gown sleeve to show me fading fingerprint bruises on her upper arm. "These are from last week. He got mad because I didn't clean up Tyler's toys fast enough. Said I was a lazy, ungrateful brat who didn't deserve a roof over my head. The documentation would be crucial, I knew. Evidence that couldn't be explained away or twisted. Sophie was old enough now to speak for herself, to be believed. The system that had failed us 10 years ago might actually protect her this time. "A social worker came by earlier," Sophie added. "She was nice, asked a lot of questions about home, about Daniel, about Mom. I told her everything, even about finding the letters and putting you as my emergency contact." "That's good, sweetheart. The truth is powerful. It's what we didn't have last time." Sophie yawned, the exhaustion of the day catching up with her. "Will you stay? I don't want to wake up and find out this was just a dream." I settled. I watched my phone, around CP, the Daniel, but when Claire, the social, Sophie, she'd been, the hearing, those were, now this time, Daniel, the judge, she did, he erupted when Sophie finished speaking, shouting that I'd brainwashed her, that this was all manipulation. The judge had to threaten contempt charges to get him to sit down. His outburst reminded me of that moment 10 years ago when he'd played the grieving friend so convincingly. Now his true nature was on full display, the controlling, violent man who'd hidden behind a facade of concern. Claire tried to do damage control, but her credibility was shattered. The judge's decision was swift and decisive. Given the evidence of abuse and neglect, he granted me temporary full custody of Sophie, with a review in 6 months. Claire was granted supervised visitation only, pending completion of parenting classes and therapy. Daniel was barred from any contact with Sophie while criminal charges were pending. When the gavel fell, I felt like I could breathe for the first time in a decade. Sophie was coming home. Not to the home she'd known with them, but to a real home where she was wanted and loved and safe. The transition wasn't easy. Sophie had to leave her school, her friends, everything familiar. We packed up her room while Claire watched, silent and defeated. Daniel was notably absent, out on bail but wisely staying away. Sophie didn't take much, just clothes and personal items, some books, her laptop. She left behind the trappings of the life they'd built on lies. Tyler, the half-brother I'd never known existed, clung to Sophie as we prepared to leave. At 3, he didn't understand why his sister was going away. Sophie knelt down, tears in her eyes, and promised to visit when she could. It wasn't his fault his father was a monster. Claire actually thanked me for that kindness, a moment of humanity in the wreckage of our past. The drive to Cincinnati was quiet at first. Sophie stared out the window, watching Charlotte disappear behind us. Then, about an hour in, she started talking. About school, about her friends, about the life she was leaving behind, but also about hopes for the future, about the photography class she wanted to take, about colleges she was considering. Normal teenage things that felt like miracles to me. We stopped for lunch at a little diner halfway home, and Sophie laughed when I ordered exactly what she was thinking of getting. "Genetic," she said with a smile. "Mom always said I was just like you. Used to make her crazy." "That's my girl," I said, and meant it with every part of me. My apartment felt different with Sophie in it. Fuller, warmer, like it had been waiting for her all along. We spent the first few days just existing in the same space, learning each other's rhythms. She was neat, but not obsessive, liked her music loud, but wore headphones without being asked, cooked surprisingly well thanks to years of fending for herself when Claire and Daniel were busy with Tyler. The bruises faded, but the emotional healing took longer. Sophie had nightmares, waking up confused about where she was. She flinched at sudden movements, apologized constantly for things that didn't need apologies. Years of walking on eggshells around Daniel had left their mark. I found a therapist who specialized in trauma, a gentle woman who gave Sophie space to process everything that had happened. School was a challenge. Starting junior year at a new school was hard enough without the added complications of our situation. But Sophie was resilient, making friends slowly but genuinely. She joined the photography club, started contributing to the yearbook. I went to every parent-teacher conference, every school event, making up for lost time with enthusiasm that sometimes embarrassed her but also made her smile. Emma visited during spring break, their friendship surviving the distance through constant texts and video calls. Watching them together, seeing Sophie relaxed and genuinely happy, reminded me of what had been stolen from us, but also what we were building together. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was ours to shape. Claire started her supervised visits after completing the required classes. They were awkward, stilted affairs at a family center with a social worker present. Sophie was polite but distant, answering questions but not volunteering information. Claire seemed lost, unable to connect without the framework of lies she'd built. She asked me once during a handoff if I hated her. I told her the truth. I had, for a long time. But now I just felt sorry for her. She'd traded her integrity for a man who turned out to be a monster, and now she was paying the price. Daniel pled guilty to a reduced charge, getting probation and community service instead of jail time. It felt like a slap on the wrist, but Sophie was relieved not to have to testify in a criminal trial. She had enough to deal with without reliving the trauma in court. He was barred from contacting either of us, a restraining order in place that would last until Sophie turned 18. The 6-month custody review came and went smoothly. Sophie was thriving, her grades improving, her mental health stabilizing. She'd decorated her room with photography prints, pictures she'd taken around Cincinnati as she learned to see her new city through an artist's eye. The judge made the custody arrangement permanent, with Claire maintaining supervised visits that Sophie could choose to continue or end when she felt ready. During those first 6 months, we developed our own routines and rituals, building a life together from scratch. Morning became my favorite time. Sophie would emerge from her room, hair messy and eyes still heavy with sleep, and we'd share breakfast quietly. She wasn't much of a morning person, something she definitely got from me, but these peaceful moments before the day began felt sacred. Sometimes we'd just sit in comfortable silence. Other times she'd tell me about her dreams or worry about an upcoming test. I learned all her preferences during those months. She liked her coffee with too much sugar and a splash of cream. She couldn't stand eggs, but loved French toast. She hummed while she got ready, always the same melody I couldn't identify. She left notes on the fridge when she went out, a habit born from years of needing to account for her whereabouts to avoid Daniel's anger. I told her she didn't need to, but she said it made her feel better, knowing someone cared where she was. The first time she got sick in my care, just a minor cold, I panicked. I bought every type of soup the store had, 3 different cold medicines, boxes of tissues, and enough orange juice to float a boat. Sophie laughed weakly from her bed, touched by my overreaction. "Mom would just tell me to tough it out," she said, then asked for the chicken noodle. I sat on the edge of her bed, feeling her forehead like I used to when she was little, and she let me fuss over her without complaint. Her therapist, Dr. Rebecca Chen, became an invaluable part of our support system. Sophie would come home from sessions sometimes energized, sometimes drained, always processing. She'd share what she felt comfortable sharing, and I learned to give her space when she needed it. The therapy was work, hard work, undoing years of damage and false narratives, but Sophie approached it with the same determination she brought to everything. One particularly difficult session dealt with guilt. Sophie felt guilty for not seeing through the lies sooner, for believing I'd abandoned her, for not fighting harder to find me. The irrationality of expecting a child to see through adult manipulation didn't matter to her emotional brain. I found her that evening sitting on the balcony, tears streaming down her face. We sat together in silence until she was ready to talk, and then she poured out years of self-blame I hadn't even known she was carrying. That's when I told her about my own therapy, the years I'd spent trying to process the betrayal and loss. How I'd blame myself, too, wondering what signs I'd missed, how I'd failed to protect her. We were both victims of the same crime, I told her, and neither of us was responsible for what Claire and Daniel had done. It was the first time we really talked about our parallel journeys through grief, and something shifted between us that night, a deeper understanding born from shared pain. School became another avenue for healing. Sophie threw herself into her studies with renewed focus, making up for the chaos of her last years in Charlotte. Her photography teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, recognized her talent immediately and became a mentor. He encouraged her to use the camera as a tool for processing trauma, to find beauty in broken things. The first project she showed me from his class was a series on resilience, everyday objects that had been damaged but still functioned. A cracked mug still holding coffee, a torn book still readable, a scarred tree still growing. I understood the metaphor immediately. Emma's first visit was a milestone. She took the bus from Charlotte, her parents trusting her to make the journey alone. I picked her up from the station, this teenager who had been brave enough to hide evidence, to stand up to Daniel and Claire, to protect my daughter when I couldn't. Thank you seemed inadequate, but I said it anyway. Emma just shrugged in that way teenagers do and said Sophie would have done the same for her. The bond between them was remarkable, forged in shared secrets and mutual protection. That weekend, the girls transformed my quiet apartment into something alive with laughter and music. They baked cookies at midnight, gossiping about classmates I didn't know. They stayed up watching movies, their commentary more entertaining than the films. They painted each other's nails in colors I couldn't name, normal teenage activities that Sophie had missed so much. I gave them space but stayed close enough to help if needed, finding the balance between supervision and freedom. Sunday morning, I made pancakes for all of us, a tradition that would become permanent whenever Emma visited. She told stories about Sophie from the years I'd missed, filling in gaps with the perspective only a best friend could provide. How Sophie had always been different from the other kids. Older, somehow, more careful. How she'd protected younger students from bullies even when she was scared herself. How she'd started taking pictures as a way to capture moments she was afraid would disappear. After Emma left, Sophie was quiet. I asked if she was okay, and she said she was just thinking about how different life might have been if you'd been there. Not better or worse, just different. Maybe she wouldn't have met Emma. Maybe she wouldn't have discovered photography. Maybe the pain had shaped parts of her she actually liked. It was a mature perspective that broke my heart a little, the idea that trauma had given her gifts she might not have found otherwise. As spring arrived, we started exploring Cincinnati together, Sophie with her camera, me as her willing assistant, and sometimes reluctant model. She documented the city through fresh eyes, finding angles I'd never noticed despite living there for years. The way morning light hit the fountain in Fountain Square, the patterns in the architecture of Union Terminal, the faces of strangers at Findlay Market, each with their own story. One Saturday, she convinced me to go to the Cincinnati Art Museum. I'd never been much for museums, but seeing it through Sophie's eyes changed everything. She could spend an hour in front of a single painting, analyzing composition and color theory she was learning online. She taught me to see beyond just looking, to understand what the artist was trying to communicate. When she said she was thinking about studying art in college, I wasn't surprised. Mother's Day that year was complicated. Sophie wanted to acknowledge it somehow, but didn't know how. Claire had lost the right to the traditional celebration, but ignoring the day felt wrong too. We ended up visiting a botanical garden, Sophie taking pictures of the spring flowers. She made a small photo album and mailed it to Claire with a card that said simply, "Thinking of you." It was more grace than Claire deserved, but exactly what I'd come to expect from Sophie. My birthday came next, and Sophie insisted on planning something special. She'd saved money from a part-time job at a local camera shop to take me to a nice restaurant. Watching her navigate the menu, order for us both when I got overwhelmed by choices, handle the check with such pride, I saw the adult she was becoming. After dinner, she gave me a photo she'd taken of the two of us reflected in a window downtown, our images overlapping with the city lights. It remains my most treasured possession. Summer brought new challenges. Sophie wanted to get her driver's license, a normal teenage milestone that carried extra weight given the accident that had brought us back together. First time behind the wheel, she had a panic attack, Daniel's drunken crash too fresh in her memory. We worked through it slowly, starting in empty parking lots, building her confidence back. The day she passed her test, we celebrated with ice cream like she was 6 again. College planning started earlier than I expected. Sophie was determined to have options, to not let the disruption in her education limit her future. We visited campuses together, awkward tours where I tried not to be the embarrassing dad asking too many questions. Sophie would photograph each campus, creating a visual pro and con list that made me smile. She was methodical about her future, in a way I hadn't been at her age. Claire requested a meeting that summer, just her and me, to discuss Sophie's future. I agreed reluctantly, meeting at a neutral coffee shop. She looked older, worn down by the weight of her choices and Daniel's escalating legal troubles. She wanted to contribute to Sophie's college fund, she said. It was the least she could do. I accepted on Sophie's behalf, knowing every bit would help. We didn't become friends that day, would never be friends, but we found a kind of detente for Sophie's sake. One evening, about 8 months after that first hospital visit, Sophie and I were cooking dinner together. She was teaching me how to make proper risotto, laughing at my clumsy stirring technique. The kitchen was warm and smelled like garlic and parmesan, and music played softly from her phone. It hit me suddenly, this moment of perfect ordinariness. This was what they'd stolen from us. Thousands of moments like this, simple and precious. "Dad, why are you crying?" Sophie asked, noticing the tears I hadn't realized were falling. "Happy tears," I assured her. "Just happy tears." She put down her spoon and hugged me, this teenager who'd been through so much but still had such capacity for love. We stood there in the kitchen, holding each other, reclaiming what had been lost. Sophie graduated high school with honors, accepted to several colleges for their photography programs. She chose one close enough to visit but far enough to spread her wings. Watching her walk across that stage, seeing the proud young woman she'd become despite everything, was one of the best moments of my life. Claire came to the graduation alone. Daniel was serving time by then, a DUI with injury charge finally catching up with him when he hurt another child in another accident. Sophie accepted Claire's congratulations with grace, but there was no warmth there. Too much damage, too many years of choosing Daniel over her daughter's safety. As I helped Sophie pack for college, she thanked me for not giving up, for writing all those letters even when it seemed hopeless, for being there the instant she needed me, no questions asked, for fighting for her when the system tried to keep us apart again. I told her she never needed to thank me. Loving her, fighting for her, it was as natural as breathing. Our story isn't unique, sadly. Too many children are kept from loving parents by lies and manipulation. Too many protective parents are painted as monsters by those who are the real danger. But Sophie and I were lucky. The truth found its way to light, even if it took a decade. She found those letters that proved I never stopped loving her. And when she needed me most, she reached out, trusting that I'd be there. 10 years were stolen from us. Birthdays, holidays, everyday moments that we'll never get back. But we refused to let bitterness poison what we'd found. Instead, we focused on building something new, a relationship based on truth and trust and unconditional love. Sophie still struggles sometimes with the scars Daniel left, both physical and emotional, but she's in therapy, working through it with courage that amazes me. I think about Claire sometimes, how she fell for Daniel's manipulation, how she chose him over her daughter's safety and well-being. She lost everything, her daughter, her marriage, her reputation, for a man who showed his true colors in the end. It's a cautionary tale about the choices we make and the prices we pay. Daniel is in prison now, where he belongs. His pattern of violence finally caught up with him. Sophie doesn't talk about him much, but when she does, it's with a mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness for the father figure he could have been, relief that he can't hurt anyone else. She's forgiven Claire to a degree, enough to exchange holiday cards and occasional emails, but the relationship will never be what it could have been. Trust, once shattered, is hard to rebuild. Sophie chose to keep Morrison as her last name when she turned 18. She said it felt like home, like who she really was. We celebrated with dinner at her favorite restaurant, just the two of us, marking another milestone in our journey back to each other. Now, as I sit in my apartment looking at Sophie's high school graduation photo, I'm overwhelmed with gratitude. Grateful that she found those letters. Grateful that she had the courage to reach out. Grateful for every day we've had together since that terrible, wonderful day at the hospital. The road wasn't easy, but we traveled it together, and that made all the difference. Love doesn't die, even when buried under years of lies. Truth doesn't disappear, even when hidden in dusty attic boxes. And the bond between a parent and child, a real bond built on love and trust, can survive even the most vicious attempts to destroy it. Sophie taught me that. My brave, brilliant daughter who refused to believe the lies, who searched for truth, who reached out across a decade of silence to say, "Dad, I need you." Looking back now, 5 years after that hospital reunion, I can see how far we've both come. Sophie is 21 now, in her final year of college studying photojournalism. She calls me every Sunday without fail, our tradition that started that first week in Cincinnati when she was nervous about starting at a new school. Those calls have evolved from tentative check-ins to deep conversations about life, love, career dreams, and everything in between. She's had her first serious relationship, a nice young man named Marcus who treats her with the respect she deserves. I watched carefully at first, worried that Daniel's treatment of her might have skewed her perception of what was acceptable from men. But Sophie chose well, finding someone patient and kind who understood that her trust was earned slowly. When she brought him home for Thanksgiving last year, I saw the way he looked at her, with genuine love and admiration, and I knew she'd broken the cycle. The photography project she created about our story, the one with the timeline showing our separation and reunion, won several awards and was featured in a gallery exhibition. Standing in that gallery, watching strangers moved to tears by our journey, I felt the last pieces of shame and anger from those lost years finally dissolve. Sophie had transformed our pain into art, into something that could help others understand and heal. Claire came to the exhibition. I didn't know she would be there until I saw her standing in front of the timeline, tears streaming down her face. She looked older, worn down by the weight of her choices. Tyler was with her, now 8 years old and looking so much like Daniel it was unsettling. But he had a gentleness about him that his father never possessed, holding his mother's hand and asking quiet questions about the photographs. Sophie handled the encounter with remarkable grace. She introduced Tyler properly this time, as her brother, not her half-brother. She knelt down to his level and explained in simple terms that families sometimes look different than we expect, but love is what matters. Tyler asked if she was coming home, and Sophie gently explained that she had her own home now, but that didn't mean she didn't care about him. Watched Claire during this interaction, saw the regret etched in every line of her face. After Tyler wandered off to look at other photographs with a gallery assistant, Claire approached me. We stood side by side, looking at a photo Sophie had taken of the letters she'd found in the attic, arranged like a mosaic of lost time. "I destroyed everything good in my life," Claire said quietly, "for a man who ended up destroying me too. I chose him over my daughter, over you, over everything that mattered." And now I'm alone with a son who asks why his father is in jail, and a daughter who can barely look at me. The words weren't seeking sympathy, just stating facts. I didn't offer comfort because there was none to give. Some choices can't be undone, some damage can't be repaired. But I did tell her that Sophie was healing, that she was building a good life, and that maybe that could be enough. Daniel died in prison 2 years ago. A fight with another inmate, the details murky, but the result final. Sophie found out from a news article online, not from Claire. She called me crying, not from grief exactly, but from the complexity of emotions that come when someone who hurt you profoundly is suddenly gone forever. We talked for hours that night about forgiveness, not for Daniel's sake, but for her own peace. She decided to attend the funeral, more for Tyler than anything else. I went with her, standing in the back of a nearly empty chapel. Claire was there with Tyler, a few of Daniel's relatives, some people from his work. It was a sad, small ending for someone who had loomed so large in our lives. Sophie left a single white rose on the casket, her way of letting go of the anger she'd carried. After the service, she told me she'd been thinking about forgiveness differently. Not as something you give to someone who hurt you, but as something you give to yourself. Permission to stop carrying the weight of someone else's cruelty. It was wisdom beyond her years, born from pain but transformed into strength. I've never been prouder of anyone in my life. The letters I wrote to her for all those years, she had them bound into a book for my 50th birthday. Every single one, chronologically arranged with her annotations. Her thoughts when she first read them, what they meant to her during the dark days with Daniel, how they gave her hope. Reading her words alongside mine, seeing how my desperate attempts to reach her had actually succeeded in ways I never imagined, reduced me to tears at my own birthday dinner. Emma remains Sophie's closest friend, their bond strengthened by the role Emma played in our reunion. She's studying law now, inspired by our case to become a family court attorney who actually listens to children. She wants to be the advocate Sophie needed but didn't have the first time around. The two of them have plans to start a nonprofit someday, helping children in custody disputes have their voices heard. My apartment in Cincinnati became a real home over these years. Sophie's room remains hers even though she's away at college. She comes home for breaks, fills the space with her laughter and music and the clicking of her camera. We've developed traditions, Sunday morning pancakes, evening walks in the park across the street, movie nights where we critique the cinematography because Sophie can't help herself. Work offered me a promotion that would have meant relocating to Seattle 10 years ago. I would have taken it without hesitation, always running from the ghosts of my past. But I turned it down. Cincinnati is where Sophie knows to find me. It's where we rebuilt our relationship. It's home in a way no place had been since I lost her the first time. I've dated occasionally over the years, but nothing serious. Sophie worries sometimes that I'm alone because of her, that I'm not moving forward with my life. But the truth is, I'm not alone. I have my daughter back. I have friends who supported me through the custody battle. I have a full life that just happens to have space for the right person when they come along. There's no rush. I learned patience during those 10 years of waiting. Sophie is working on a book about our story, a deeper dive than the photography project allowed. She's interviewed everyone involved, even tracking down the judge from the original custody case, who expressed deep regret about his ruling. She's turning our personal pain into something larger, an examination of how the family court system can fail children and what needs to change. I read her draft chapter sometimes, amazed at her ability to be objective about such personal pain. She writes about Daniel with nuance, acknowledging the monster he became while exploring how he might have gotten there. She writes about Claire with a daughter's disappointed love, unable to fully forgive but trying to understand. And she writes about me with such love it takes my breath away, calling me her hero while being honest about my failures too. The book will be published next year, and Sophie plans to donate part of the proceeds to organizations that help children in custody disputes. She wants our story to matter beyond just us, to maybe save some other child from losing years with a loving parent. It's her way of making meaning from chaos, beauty from pain, hope from heartbreak. Tyler visits us sometimes now. After Daniel's death and with Claire's permission, Sophie wanted to maintain a relationship with her brother. He's a sweet kid, nothing like his father, full of curiosity and kindness. He calls me Mr. Mike and asks endless questions about everything. Watching Sophie with him, patient and loving despite everything, shows me the mother she'll be someday. Claire is trying to rebuild her life, working as a receptionist and living in a small apartment after losing the house. She's in therapy, finally dealing with whatever drew her to Daniel in the first place. Sophie has lunch with her once a month, carefully boundaried interactions that seem to help them both. I don't hate her anymore. I just see her as someone who made catastrophic choices and is living with the consequences. Sometimes I think about the man I was before all this happened. Naive, trusting, taking my family for granted because I couldn't imagine losing them. That man died in a courtroom 10 years ago, but the man who emerged from that devastation, who never stopped fighting for his daughter even when it seemed hopeless, who showed up at a hospital to reclaim what was stolen, he's someone I'm proud to be. Sophie, she has an the other I remind she laughed. It was a not ever. I keep people Sophie, but some I've made mistakes in our rebuilding, been overprotective sometimes, uncertain others, but because that's what love does. It shows up imperfectly, but consistently. It tries again after failure. It believes in the possibility of healing even when the wounds seem too deep. As I finish writing this, Sophie is on her way over for our weekly dinner. She's bringing her camera to take photos of the sunset from my balcony, still finding beauty in ordinary moments. We'll cook together, probably pasta because it's become our tradition. We'll talk about her week, her plans, her dreams, normal father-daughter things that feel miraculous every single time. The doorbell just rang. I can hear her voice calling, "Dad, are you home?" As if I would be anywhere else when my daughter is coming to visit. As if there's anywhere in the world I'd rather be than right here, in this moment, in this life we've built from the ashes of what was stolen. 10 years we lost, but a lifetime we've gained. And that, in the end, is everything. That is our victory, that is our joy. That is our love story, written not in spite of the pain, but through it, stronger for the breaking, whole in ways we never imagined possible. Sophie walks in without waiting for me to answer, comfortable in this space that's as much hers as mine. She's carrying groceries for dinner and talking about her day, and the sound fills the apartment with life. This is what they tried to steal, this easy intimacy, this natural rhythm of family. They failed. Love won. Truth won. We won. And we'll keep winning, one ordinary moment at a time, for all the years we have ahead.